Once again, this is Snoot from the Snoot Group. Without breaking my attorney-client privilege, let's just say that the Lumen family are still not available to record. So this week, we are going to play you a Best of Light Talk episode from August 3rd, 2018. This is a conversation they had with renowned lighting designer Paule Constable. We're expecting the Lumen family to be back next week. So meanwhile, enjoy this episode of the Best of Light Talk.
Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk.
Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Zach coming to you from our nation's capital. Today, our very special guest making her first appearance on the show is one of the pioneers of projection design, Ms. Wendell Harrington.
Woo! And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Hey! Welcome everyone to episode 217. And first, before we get started, for those who may not know, that amazing bass line and solo guitar that is being played in the background is being played by the multi-talented Lumen Brother Zach. We want to welcome back Lumen Brother Zach Borovray to Light Talk. Hey Zach, how you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're always welcome. You're going to be back at least like once a month, hopefully. You know, that would be cool.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm happy to do it.
Excellent. It's great to have you here. And today, we are thrilled to have another legend of light, and I believe mentor to Brother Zach, the amazing Wendell Harrington, here on Light Talk. We have been waiting for 5 years to get her on the show, and now that we've enslaved Zach and his bass guitar, Wendell has agreed to appear as ransom for his freedom. So welcome, Wendell. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, and I'm happy to be ransoming Zach, who I love very much.
He's worth it.
Definitely worth it.
He's worth spending 50 minutes with us, huh?
You bet.
Okay. Although you probably had to think about it.
Not a bit.
Oh, that's sweet.
Now, the question here is do you play any musical instruments? Can we add you to the band?
No, I'm afraid not.
You know, we have an opening for a tambourine player. Do you have rhythm?
I definitely have rhythm.
Okay, you're in the band. Okay, before we get started, Zach, could you please tell our listeners a little bit about Wendell?
It would be my pleasure. It has been said that in the world of projection design, all roads lead to Wendell K. Harrington, the godmother of modern projection design. Her career has embraced diverse disciplines, including projection design for theater, publishing, and video production. She has designed over 30 Broadway shows, including All the Way, Driving Miss Daisy, Great Gardens, They're Playing Our Song, The Elephant Man, My One and Only, so many I can't even go into it. And of course, The Who's Tommy. And many, many off-Broadway and regional productions, Sunday in the Park with George, Angels in America, Hapgood, Merry We Roll Along 4 times, and the ill-fated Whistle Down the Wind. Her extensive opera credits include Werther at the Met, Julie Taymor's The Magic Flute, A View from the Bridge at Chicago Lyric, Grapes of Wrath, Rusalka from Minnesota Opera, Nixon in China. She's designed for every major ballet company and dance company all over the world. She designed player introductions for the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, concerts for the Talking Heads, Pete Townsend, Chris Rock, John Fogerty, Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh my God.
She is the recipient of the Drama Desk Disc Award, the Outer Critics Circle Award, the American Theater Wing Award, the TCI Award for Technical Achievement, the Obie Award for Sustained Excellence, the Michael Merritt Award, the Ruth Morley Women in Design Award, the USITT Educational and Digital Technology Awards, and lifetime recognition for the Knights of Illumination. Ms. Harrington has been lecturing on projection design for theater since the early 90s and is the head of the projection design concentration at the Yale School of Drama. And that's the abridged version.
Is that all?
You know, I could tap dance and
And you play tambourine.
I play tambourine. And I've raised 2 kids.
Fantastic. How do you raise kids doing all these shows? My God.
And raise them not to want to be in the theater. So that's my major accomplishment.
I've consulted with Wendell many times over the last 12 years about that exact question.
And hopefully she's given you some very good advice.
Always.
Wow. Well, thanks a lot, Zach. So welcome to Light Talk, Wendell. And let's get started because we have a lot to ask you. Steve has the first question of the day.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your origin story. Growing up, did you have a lot of exposure or involvement in theater? And part 2 of that, do you recall seeing anything that included projections growing up?
Well, here's the crazy story, and that is I saw my first Broadway musical in tech. I have no experience in the theater. And my experience in the theater mostly was from watching Busby Berkeley musicals. And that was what I thought was theater. And imagine my surprise when you can't get 700 girls on a stage. But I did read plays. I was fascinated by plays. I listened to Broadway cast albums that my parents had lying around the house. And I grew up in New York, so I went to Shakespeare in the Park. But I never thought that no clue whatsoever. My interest was in cinema and art history. And I was working in advertising because there was no work in the film industry in the 70s for women. And I got a call one day from Bill Batchelder at Staging Technique saying, Theron Musser needs a slide. I had no idea who Theron Musser was.
A slide? Just one slide?
Well, there was just, she had this idea she wanted to try. And so I went over, I met this nice gray-haired lady, had no idea who she was, don't know anything. But she was actually trying to invent this color wheel. And she had this idea that she wanted to test out, but she needed to have pure color in slide form. And I knew how to do that because I'd been doing stuff for my advertising clients. And I did it. It was successful. It was a test for ballroom. They hung some projectors above. Yeah, so everything was circular in ballroom. Right. So we made all these circles and they tested it and they liked it. And then I was replaced by a lighting fixture. So story of my life.
Sounds like you're a little bitter there.
No. Are you kidding?
You let it go.
It was fabulous. It was fabulous. She was great. And hard drinking, fast talking, cigarette smoking woman who really, I have to say, is a primary influence. And she recommended me to Doug Schmidt when he was doing They're Playing Our Song. And I left my job in advertising, and the rest is, and then the rest, as they say, is history. Of course, it's important for everybody to know that I did not make a living working in theater from 1979 until I did Tommy in 1994. So just to clarify for everybody that it's a long road. A lot of Broadway shows in there, but none of them that actually anybody could live on.
A quick question, a follow-up there. Were projection designers paid well back then? Were they comparable to lighting designers or set designers?
Well, I have to say, for my whole life, I had to fight to get parity with lighting. That was my first thing that I tried to do. But when I did They're Playing Our Song, there was no line for a projection designer. And since nobody knew what it was going to take, I got hired on a day rate, which in the end was very lucrative. And I never got that again. And I ended up making more money than the set designer. And, that was great. But, of course, that never happened again because everybody thought, it'd just take a few days. Well, they kept rewriting. So that was why it was took more time.
So you just talked a little bit about your work in advertising and how that sort of parlayed into your theatrical career. So can you just tell us a little bit about the kind of stuff that you did in advertising that led to you being the person that knew how to make that slide with the pure color?
Sure. I had been, as I said, I was interested in film, and that was where I thought I was going to head. And I had done some work doing, what we called experimental and avant-garde films in the 60s. And I tried to, break into the big time, but the 70s were really hard. And I took a job at an ad agency on a bet. And I got this job, and while I was there, they would be like, oh, you kid with the film background, you could do this. So I would supervise commercials, and what they would do is we would have sales meetings, which were euphemistically called business theater. And things like the Milk and Breakfast Show, I don't know if you guys are aware of things like that, but in the 70s, dancing lazy boy chairs, no joke. And you had a bunch of slide projectors, and I had to figure out how all of that worked. And I got really lucky. I've always been lucky with generous mentors, and Bill Batchelder of Staging Techniques was extremely helpful to me. Batch had previously been a lighting designer and stage manager for Martha Graham, so he had a lot of information. And at that time, in the early days of slide making, it was what we would call top lit, and that is you took a picture out of a book and projected it. But what we were doing in the 70s was doing things that were built out of gels. And so you would make it out of several layers of colored gels shaped. You don't want to hear the whole saga of what it takes to do this. It's too complicated. But basically, then you put the light from below and photograph that, which means what you have is something that's quite luminous and the color is pure. So that's the kind of work that I was doing for these sales meeting and slideshows for Milliken and for Lazy Boy chairs and things like that. And we have been developing that technique, and that's why Theron called, because she knew that I was working with pure color as opposed to reflective art. In the old days, you should know that, the early use of projections were colored painted glass slides. And, I did work early on with, it's like heat sensitive, very not heat sensitive paints that were clear that you could paint on glass. But I'm working in 35 millimeter, which is, as you know, quite small. The early projectors were more like the Reichenvogels and the Panis. So you're working with slides that were, 6 inches across. So that's a lot easier to paint, but that was not a flexible tool for theatrical use or Broadway use.
That's interesting you talk about the panties, because that was my first job as a professional designer. I was assisting Neil Giampoulos, and I was in charge of all the panties and the slides, trying to carry those slide carriers around.
No kidding. But I miss those panties, miss them. They're the most beautiful, beautiful.
Exactly what you said. You could paint on the slides,
yeah.
And they were so beautifully cooled that it really was, you didn't have any worry about anything melting or anything like that. It was just I was just going to ask you about the panties, how much work you did with the panties.
Oh, a lot of work with panties. Yeah. And, and then we got panty scrollers. So that was the great, quote unquote, improvement. But I miss those panty days. I found recently an article that I had written when we converted a View from the Bridge from panties to video. This is an opera by Bolcom. And it was so sad for me because, it was there. The image was there. It was bright. It just wasn't the same.
You didn't have the contrast. You can't do the same contrast.
It doesn't have, right. and I began to fall in love with the funkiness of the fades of the panties. They're human. It's like everything is algorithmic now, and it's lost humanity. So panties had like what I would call a lot of juice. Yeah. I miss that.
That's beautiful. I like that. So let's jump back again and talk a little bit about Playing Our Song. That was your first Broadway production. And at the time, only like a handful of shows in the history of Broadway included any type of projected imagery, and none with a dedicated projection designer who wasn't also a scenic or lighting designer. How did your involvement in this show come about?
Well, it was actually Doug Schmidt is credited as the scenic and projection designer. And he is essentially the designer of the imagery. But what Doug didn't know anything about was about how to animate and also how to create the art. He knew what he wanted. So in that sense, he's fully, I'm fully the designer, but he didn't know how to make it move, and he didn't know how to build it, and he didn't know how to program, so I came in and did that. So I didn't even ask for billing, and I don't think I got billing. And that, it was totally fun. What did I know? I didn't know anything about billing or royalties or anything. I was just like, it's like, what am I doing in this place? But so that's how that evolved from that. And it was a long time, actually, before I got billing as a projection designer. That was one of the battles to be recognized as a full art, design department. And it's one of the reasons why I didn't join the union for 30 years. Because they would not call it projection design. They wanted to call it allied crafts. I'm sorry. That's for people who are doing swords and, and making masks. I am as an equivalent, if not better than, in many cases, the other departments that have design credits. So I held out. And, so finally we got it. By the time I got it, I didn't need a union anymore because I had already I had to make every single one of those things happen. I had to make the title happen. I had to make the billing happen. I had to make the royalties happen. I had to make the pay equity happen. So joining the union at that point was actually a little bit of a step backward because they set fee limits that were way lower than mine.
Sounds like you really pioneered this, and a lot of people could thank you for the work that you did battling for all this equity.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, and when the time came that we did become our own category in the union, like I guess at the time there was about 19 projection designers that were working, and we kind of all said to each other, like, the only way this is going to work is if we can get Wendell to help fight with us, and she graciously and happily did.
Yeah, it was important to do it.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that Wendell enjoys fighting for the cause.
Oh, yes.
Yes, good for you.
I have been told, though, that I have to let go of the patriarchy, that is actually not a fight I'm going to win in this lifetime. So I'm trying to let that one go.
But you have a sword now.
I have a sword.
You can bring it to the union meetings.
You know what? At this point, the union meetings are the least of my problems. I'm looking at a larger revolution.
Well, it seems like after your initial success on Broadway, your career expanded really rapidly. Did you make a conscious decision to branch out into concerts and dance and opera, or was that all just organic?
It was nobody else. I answered the phone calls that came. And just so everybody understands, all this time, I was still doing business theater. I was doing advertising and marketing. I put in a full 3 years as the design director of Esquire magazine in the 80s. Just a little detour because I was a single mother and I needed a paycheck and health insurance. And so the life in the theater, though I feel very drawn to it, just didn't take care of me. I remember when I took the job at Esquire, I think I had done maybe merrily with Sondheim. We had gotten quite close, and I felt like I was deserting the theater, and I wrote him a note saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to be occupied. And he said, the theater deserted you. And I did feel like that. There was no way for me to raise a kid doing what I was doing, and I was doing everything. Every damn show there was. And it was exhausting. But there just wasn't any money in it. And so I had to take a job for a while.
But I will add, and this is one of the 10 million pearls of wisdom that Wendell imparted on me in my career early on, was that you when you did work with Esquire, you negotiated, I think, to have enough vacation time to take the occasional show.
Oh, yes, I did do that.
Because it was important to keep your foot in that pool.
Yeah. No, I didn't let go. I certainly didn't let go. And there's everybody I knew got into Esquire. in those years when I was there. I did, Pete Feller. Who would know about Pete Feller? But I did a little story about Pete Feller in Esquire magazine. I had Hal Prince. It's like I took care of my own.
So one of the things that you worked on during that time, which I'm sure at the time was like it's just another project that you answered the phone, maybe, was the Talking Heads Stop Making Sense concert film. And a lot of people still to this day say that that's the greatest concert film ever made. And I know that's something that I've, talked to you and read lots of things about you even before I met you, and I still don't know that much about it. I'd love to know more about how that project came about.
It came about because of Beverly Emmons, because Beverly was lighting the concert. And literally, I have nothing to do with the film. They just filmed the concert, but I did do the concert. And Beverly recommended me to David Byrne, which was funny because Chris and Tina lived in the building with Moki Cherry. Zach, Moki. And so I knew all of them just sort of socially and in the hallway, where people would step out and smoke. So I knew them. And again, David just needed somebody to make some slides for him. And I remember having a conversation with them even then about the Black RP, which I hate. I hate Black RP, about how it was never going to work. And, having an artist tell me, oh, yes, this is going to be great. And every time I see that movie, all I can see is the damn hotspot. So it's like, it's not Black RP. It's not good rear projection material. And so it really wasn't that complicated. The most complicated thing was that I was like 900 years pregnant at the time that we were teching it at Forest Hills and worrying that my child was going to be birthed singing Psycho Killer.
Well, it's either that or Tommy. So
right. I have an acid queen. And it turns out that Anna is a huge Talking Heads fan, and I'm sure it's because of everything she heard in utero. So it's not that complicated a show because there's just a very few slides, really. But it was really more about making it spool out right.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me as a young designer, seeing that even before I was aware of you or before you were a twinkle in my eye, so to speak, that like, it was just, there's something about the simplicity of it that it was, that I remember later on when you and I were working on something and somebody called you like ye of exquisite taste. And that's exactly, it made me think back to that of like, it was not a very complex design, but it was like everything was perfectly suited for that moment. And it created this like environment and this emotion that, you didn't get from a Van Halen concert or something else like that.
But that's David too, because David he is a master of restraint.
Sure.
And so that's an excellent collaboration in that sense.
Yeah. I'll always remember the bookshelves and the lamp, that way those things go together.
Right.
So, Wendell, last week we had Jim Moody and Jeff Ravitz on, and we talked a lot about balancing video and stage lighting and projections. And nowadays, obviously, it's a lot easier because the sensors and the cameras are so amazingly sensitive the cameras have a lot more dynamic range. Did you have to do anything as far as balancing projections for that, for the film? Because they actually filmed that.
I was actually not involved in the film, though.
Okay.
I've spent a lot of time with Alan Edelman sussing out these things. Alan. And when we did a concert at Town Hall that was going to go at PBS, and we actually got in a room, the two of us, with gels, a camera, and our panis, because it was a pani show, and just making lots of notes and, re-gelling the projectors to match the stage lighting. And it's something I have to say that Alan I think was the person who really made me aware of color temperature. And for me, it's really, it's a crisis when I see people who have not really taken that to heart, because it just creates two separate worlds. And it is still one of the things that I tell my students, that you do far better putting a piece of no-color sun in front of the lens of your projector than you will ever get by trying to calibrate it, because the lamp color is the lamp color. And everything you calibrate with your algorithm is still not going to turn yellow into blue, or you're never going to get the purest yellow because the lamp color is the lamp color. So it's just that people don't use their eyes. And again, it's one of those things I learned from Theron. It's like if anybody put a light meter on a stage, Theron would have removed a part of their anatomy. So it's like eyeballs. It's all about your eyeballs. So it's like, see everybody buried in their computers with their meters, and it's like, what do your eyes see? I don't care what a meter tells me.
Yeah, that's sort of what Jim was saying last week. He hasn't used a meter in like 30 years or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
So the Who's Tommy is still considered to be, in many ways, the ultimate projection show. I know all of my generation of designers, and even the people who have come after me, were always saying to each other, like, we're hoping this next show is going to be our Tommy. It's that moment. And in a lot of ways, it kind of pushed the art of slide projections as far or further than what was thought to be humanly possible. I always felt like you took this technology and you took all of its limitations and made that into the actual style and the design. And I'd love to know some more about how that project came about and maybe how it evolved from the out of town to when it came in.
Well, sure. I mean, I could tell you that I had always hoped that Tommy would be my cats.
Now and forever.
I think they racked up a few bucks for that. Well, the story of Tommy is that John Arnone was doing Tommy with Des McAnuff, and I got a call in my studio about what it was they were trying to do. They were asking me questions about how to do it. And then I realized that they were really clueless about what it was they were doing. They had an idea, but they just no sense, not just of the technology, but even how to accomplish what it was that they wanted to accomplish. So I said, well, I'll let me just make a storyboard and we'll just, figure out how you're going to do this. And the next thing I know, I'm on a plane to La Jolla. So in La Jolla, it was 9 screens because you had the depth in La Jolla to cover the space with rear projection. And it was very... there was nobody there who knew anything about anything. I have 2 lovely people who I love to this day, Victoria Petrovich and Vince Mountain, who assisted me, who were students at UCSD. But they really, and who knew slides and who knew this level of slide making? And we only had 1 set of slides, so you'd work all day and you'd have to make changes all night, which meant you'd climb up the scaffold, put the slide trays on, take the slides down, put them in a shopping wagon, and move them over to the studio space that I had there. Work all night reprogramming. It's all AVL, at that point, with nobody who knows how to program except me, and I'm not that good at it. I'm just, I program with an axe. I can make things happen. And I had a sort of base thing that I was editing, and every once in a while we'd call in this guy who knew how to use it, but we had to pay him, and his name was the Big Kahuna. And so he would come in.
I know him. I know the Big Kahuna.
So, he would come in and he would re-edit, and it was just about the hard. I did not sleep for 3 days. And the Flying Karamazov brothers were working in the next hut, literally, and they would come and go, and they would stick their head in, and I was drinking, I learned about what is it called, a hammerhead, black coffee with 2 shots of espresso, that and a joint, and you can get through anything. So it was, I thought it was okay. This is going to be kind of a dangerous thing to say, but Chris Perry was not the original lighting designer of this show. Does everybody know that? If Frances Aronson was the original lighting designer of Tommy in La Jolla. She was fabulous. They fired her, And, because you can only have one loudmouth woman on a show, and that was, and I could not be replaced. And it's just, to this day, is like one of the most shameful things. And Tommy on Broadway, by the time it was going to Broadway and Chris Perry was doing it, the color of my slides comes from the clothes. There's no color in the set. I took the colors of David Woolard's clothes, scene by scene, he matched Pantone colors, and I matched gel colors to his clothes. So that scene by scene, everything is a complete color harmony. I handed those gels to Chris Perry to make color scrollers. So when everybody says about how beautiful Tommy, how collaborative Tommy looks, and everybody wins a Tony Award for that, except for the person who made that collaboration, it's a little pissy for me.
God, that's just sad.
What's sad is that apparently my name was on the nomination when it left the Tony committee, but it fell off when the announcement, which you can check that with Ted Chapin.
What the hell? What happened?
I don't know. You want my guess? I'm guessing it was the union because I wasn't a member.
You weren't in the union at the time.
No, I wasn't anything. I was in no union.
Right.
Because nobody would have me.
I saw that show maybe second night, and I had never seen anything like that in my life. I kept watching it, kept staring at it, and I'd keep opening my program and look at who these people were who had done this. I had never seen a show like that. I haven't seen a show like that since.
Well, it's insane. Nobody would do what we did. It was so labor intensive. I give you 5 cents for the people who are working in digital video now. They would look at what we did and weep. No kidding. It's a handcraft. It was like making the Bayou Tapestry. There's like 20,000 slides were made for that. And, only 2,000 remain. But every single image is made of 18 separate slides. 18 separate slides that have to be mounted, cleaned, put in the right place. 2 sets of them. Every time you change your mind, take down 54 slide trays. Figure out where the new slides go. Take out the old slides. Don't make a mistake. Nobody would do that. Nobody would put that level of energy into it. And even in terms of programming, the miraculous Paul Vershbow, who's my programmer to this day, it was the first time that we worked together. The AVL at that time could handle X amount of projectors. It could not handle 54. So we had the programming thing and an expander. So we had a computer and what you can no longer say, a slave to run all of the projectors. You run out of alphabet at that point. So then you're like A, B, B, C, because what do you call things? You can't call them numbers because it's too complicated. So
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the reason it wasn't your cats is no one could maintain it. No one could keep this thing running for decades.
How would they maintain it on Broadway?
Oh, we maintained it. It was fabulous, and we did a perfect job of it. I will tell you the reason it was not my cats was that Des McAnuff would not hire somebody after, what's his name, left. Because he was unhappy with anybody who was offered to him to take over the role.
Oh, Michael?
Michael, yeah.
Yeah, Cerberus.
So he wouldn't hire anybody else. So, please.
I have to say something about Tommy because I saw Tommy at La Jolla because David Woolard was actually a classmate of mine at SMU. And I wanted to see his show. And at the time, I believe I was teaching at SMU at that time. And I went to see it. David asked me to come. I went to see it. And it was just fabulous. But I do remember, didn't you have like TVs in it? Like TV sets around
there are TV sets. I don't think they had them in La Jolla. I think that was added in New York.
Well, I've seen it several times, so I'm mixing up
and
productions.
the video was done by Batwin and Robin. And I didn't want to do the video. I don't like video. I didn't like it then because it's so I didn't find it a really welcoming theatrical tool at that point. It was, and I also thought it's small. It was distracting. It's just it just didn't make sense to me as something that was required.
Yeah, I actually felt that those later productions with the video were lacking a bit because of that, and for the reasons you just stated. Because again, I saw it at La Jolla when it was first being done. It was fabulous. It was
Right. I mean, in
incredible.
some ways, the interesting intersection there is it's almost like that was a moment in time where the slides were kind of handing off to video, like, okay, video, you take it from here. For the future, there's no more we can do with slides. We've done it all.
Oh, I don't know that there's no more we can do. I'd go back in a heartbeat. I still think the color is better.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I will say I was approached to design a show once where I said, I think this would be really cool to do with slides. And they were like, next.
Yeah, no, I understand. Nobody wants the difficulty. But I think the difficulty is the asset. Because I think what I see is a lot of lazy design these days. And it really frustrates me because everything is so easy. Oh, you want to see in blue? Here it is in blue. Why don't you make a decision? Why don't you really think about what you want and commit? Or, go through the struggle of making a change instead of not doing your homework, which is kind of what I see a lot of. And I see directors who don't want to see in advance. They want to wait. And it's like, what a waste of time. It just makes no sense to me. It's not, things don't get well developed that way.
Yeah, I've said on this show, I think, citing your experience with Tommy specifically, about how much time and effort and person power and money went into making even a small change, that you really had to think about it and envision it and make a decision about if that was the right thing to do. And so there was a lot more thought that went into the design than just like, let me hit the blur button and see if it looks better blurry.
Right. And the thing is, you always know it's an algorithm, and it always looks not handmade. And this is what I find so objectionable to what I see, because theater is about live human beings on stage, communicating with a live audience. Everybody, let's all share our 98.6 and feel the warmth in the room. And when you're letting computers make decisions, which you do every time you let a video edit be what a video edit would be, as opposed to making a decision about the up and the down, ladies and gentlemen of the lighting world. But that's where the living is. The living is in that moment, in that decision of the transition. Yeah. And when you let the machines do the talking, it lacks humanity. That's all I can say.
Well, we've had some pretty strong women on the show: Elaine McCarthy, Paule Constable, Ann Militello. Do you want to lend your voice to what it's like being a woman, certainly in the 70s and 80s when this was a male-dominated industry, and trying to have a family and trying to have a professional life?
I didn't try. I actually did it. Look, it's the hand you're dealt, and you just get up every morning and you face down the devil. But there was so much to learn. I almost got knocked off a balcony rail by Eddie Lapidus because he thought he could. And it was that kind of disrespect and, continual, the tech director of Tommy was Gene O'Donovan. And, the idea that they know more about what I do than I do is like just brutal to me. And I just hate having arguments about things that I know about. And I'm not a smart ass, and I don't know everything, but I do know certain things. I do know that you don't mask a projector by hanging a piece of foam core on the lens. This is not the way to mask a projector, especially when I've got a stagehand who has to climb up and down that scaffold like a monkey every day. So, and it's like just to stand there and say, no, I said no, no, and no, and yet it still happens. That would not happen if I was a man. They would just accept it. They look at me and they think, well, you can't know anything about technology. And I'm actually the first person to say, I don't know that much about technology, but I do know how to make things happen. And I do know how to figure it out. I'm not stupid. So it's just kind of that thing is really frustrating. And let us just pause for one moment and note, every single projection design in the 70s and 80s and 90s was done by a woman. Who's doing them now?
Very interesting.
When I started in 2001, there was one other person that was doing projections that was male, and everybody that we worked for was female. And I think a lot of that also has to do with the specific kind of job it is and the eye for detail, that like it's something that's much more of a female skill. I think they're much better at that than us.
It's like, well, it's why all the great film editors are all women. Because you have to keep so many things straight in your head at the same time. That is ultimately female because, we got a baby on the hip and we're cooking and we're talking on the phone. So, that is part of the construct. It's not to say that women are better than men. But the fact is that once they found that they could have men instead of women, they were very happy to get rid of the women. They were very happy to not have me on Broadway anymore. The thing I just want to say because we're talking about being female in the business and truly in any business, and as I said, I was the design director of Esquire for many years. The thing that happens is you get robbed of your femininity. And that's the thing that's so awful. The fact that you do have to learn to talk like a truck driver, that you have to force yourself to outboy the boys in order to succeed is a kind of criminal act. And I'm talking to you from the ripe age of 71 right now. And I'm sad about that. That is a loss. And that can never come back. That can never be replaced. I got the jobs, it's like all of that is fine. But that was really damaging. And I hope that damage can be over. I see a great growth. I mean, I teach at Yale, and I have to say, I teach a lot of fantastic women. And I'm hopeful that they won't have to make those choices.
Yeah. Back in the late 70s, I was talking to Marilyn Renegal about this, because I was actually shadowing her on a production she was doing in Dallas. And I asked her, I said, how do you handle these guys? I mean, a lot of the crews were, pretty nasty and rough. And she says, unfortunately, I have to dress the way I dress because that's the only way they'll accept me, And I could never wear a dress on stage, I could never do this. Not to say that she would want to, but that was the fact. I mean, women had to and continually have to make compromises in order to survive in our profession. And that sucks. Yeah.
But I brought my kids to tech, and that was important to me because I wanted to sort of express myself as a woman, as a mother, and understand that I'm a full human being. I know I'm here to solve your problem, and I'm doing a job, but at the same time, I'm doing these other jobs. And that was definitely one of the reasons why I brought my kids into tech.
Yeah. I know Paule Constable told us a story about that too. She did something similar. And it is about, I can do that too and raise human beings. So
exactly.
So Wendell, many designers of all disciplines cite you as an influence. Who are some of your influences and why?
Well, absolutely. My greatest influence was Theron. Because she just was so detail-oriented and such a great dramaturge. And again, since she was my first lighting designer, I learned so much from her watching her work, but also at night at the bar. That was where but that's where you heard everything.
Right.
Where you'd have a couple of drinks, there'd be a few war stories, and then there would be that, that thing when that happens, that's really shit. What are we gonna do about that? It's like that cross doesn't work. How can this happen? And that she was relentless. And I so respected that. And I think I'm a bit relentless myself. And she empowered me to feel like that was actually what one did. It was never over. They threw you out of the theater. You had to stop. That was when you finished working. And that has been a great model for me. And of course, Doug Schmidt, who gave me my break doing They're Playing Our Song, because he taught me, I mean, I knew nothing. I knew nothing about anything when I came into the theater. I didn't know upstage from downstage, or, you know, in truth, I still can't figure out stage right and stage left. But everything he looked at was wonder. He had this childlike wonder, and I have to say, God bless him, he still has it. I remember walking across the street with him and having him point out like the zebra stripes in the crosswalk and say, oh, if you like close one eye, it's like a zoetrope. And it's like somebody who's like always inventive, always looking at how things come together. And because They're Playing Our Song was in its way based on pop art, and because I have my art history background, that was also very influential to me, because there's no project that I start that doesn't begin with looking at art. Of whether it's I'm looking at the art of the period that I'm working in, just to sort of feel what that atmosphere of that might be, and also just, I mean, I made a ballet where I like took trees from Bruegel and like rebuilt forests, and so it's that kind of inspiration of saying, oh, you just can take from all of these sources because you're absorbing all of this. So he was a terrific center for me, and he's still kind of a center. And of course, I mean, I've had great directors like Richard Eyre, who have taught me so much about being in the play. I don't know anybody who works with actors the way he does. And Frank Galati, who is a great storyteller. He knows how to get a story out over the footlights in such a deep and endearing way. And I mean, Sondheim, Jesus. Every word. The joke is my second child, Emma, who is highly tattooed, and has a giant like Sondheim, partly Sondheim tattoo with all his shows kind of like weaving all around, which is just, what? But she was born to my trying to remember the words after getting up on a 7, after moving on a ferry on an island in the river, and on a Sunday. So, that's how great has been our lives to have the kind of influence of somebody, such craftsmen as these. I still can't remember those lyrics.
That's why we have kids, because they can.
They can. Yeah, she knows. She has them all.
Yeah.
But I had no mentor in that sense, because nobody could teach me. There was nobody. And later, I discovered people like Ron Chase. But that was not until later. I didn't know anybody who was doing projections for the stage. And, Doug had done some little stuff, and it wasn't until later that I met Tony Walton, and I began to, I saw some of the things that he had done for Funny Thing and Golden Boy and stuff like that. But of course, I hadn't been to the theater, so I hadn't seen any of those things.
And I think that a lot of this sounds like, and I obviously, this is going through the filter of my own experience of knowing you and working with you, is that there's a lot of this knowledge that you've organically sort of taken in through osmosis, and that these influences have really helped you to make the connections between them, to figure out, like, not just the I don't know why I know this, but like, this is what that actually means, and this is how it can be used, and this is what that's called, kind of stuff. So, because I've always seen that there's just like the art is coming from within, and then, some of it is just we're helping to label it and shape it and show you like where we can put it.
I've always been extremely hungry for knowledge, because I didn't get to go to college but for a year, and I always have felt the not exactly embarrassment about it, but I always need to know more. And when I'm interested in a thing, I'm going totally down the well, and I'm going to know everything there is to know about it, or as much as I can. And I think that is one of the things that serves me well, is being able to draw from these depths of knowledge, sort of random knowledge, and find connections between those things, because I think that that's what makes imagery so interesting. I mean, the fact that I cared so much about the Northern Renaissance, leads me to Bruegel to know that guy paints a perfect tree, or perfect in the way that I want it to be perfect. So, but if I hadn't gone down the Bruegel hole at some point in my life, I wouldn't have known that. If I hadn't sat in on all these art history lectures that that Leo Sternberg let me audit for years at Hunter, I would not have known that. But that's the hunger. That's why it's, yes, everybody Googles, but I still book, because the books are where you're going to not just find things, but you're going to find the things that are on the facing page that aren't the thing that you're looking for, but are suddenly going to inspire you to go in a completely other direction that will get you to the place you're trying to go. So it's making those connections. That's what's really important.
So speaking of that, like around the time when I started my career in the early 2000s, the majority of the people working in projections in New York all came from what we called the Wendell School. We'd all worked with you at some point because that was the path to becoming your own projection designer. And then at a certain point, you created this graduate program, which at Yale, which is one of the first in the country. And how did that come to be a thing?
Well, Yale came about because Ming Cho Lee asked me. I would occasionally go up to Yale over the years with my little tray of slides and talk about projections to the set designers. But he called me and asked if I would come up and teach a class for a semester. So I came up and I taught a class for a semester, and I guess it went well. So 3 semesters later, they said, would you consider starting an MFA program? And I thought, great, I never went to college. I'm sure I could figure this out. And
you probably did a great job, obviously, by not going to college.
right? I think in a way, because I have zero interest in what is commonly called pedagogy, but I have a lot of interest in what it takes to do a thing. I figured it out. And and in a way, my program at Yale is quite different than the other programs at Yale, Lights and Sets, which are really critique-based, which is show me what you've made and I'll tell you if it's any good. And I get that as a form. But in the world of projection, I feel there's so many things to know, including, history of animation, cinema history, looking at how projection has evolved over time, and really talking about what I would call the spirituality of projection and why I believe it is spiritual and poetic and not didactic, and, the difference between piscator and, other ways of thinking about imagery. I teach in a sort of more somewhat more academic way, though it's hilarious most of the time, because we do a lot of very odd projects. Like they make little animation, hand animation projects, and I do a lot of work with tear sheets in and stay as far away from the computer as I possibly can until we can no longer stay away. Because I'm trying to help people learn visual storytelling. If you understand visual storytelling, which comes in many aspects, you'll figure out what technology you need. If you start with the technology, what is that to a hammer? Every problem is a nail. Technology is tomorrow. It's like yesterday. It's, whatever it is, it's going to be something else tomorrow. So, but if you know how to tell a story with pictures, you'll know how to do that for the rest of your life. So that's my approach there. And I'm such a mother, so I really have, I love those kids. And it's, I love teaching for that reason. I'm inspired by them every day. I'm inspired by the things that they want and need and are curious about and take me down different pathways. It's really exciting. So that's how it came about. I'm always on the verge of quitting, but it's mostly because I'm not good at institutions. But
who is?
But I love the students. I love the teaching, and I love trying to figure out what's next.
Well, it's probably an exaggeration, but it seems to me that I haven't met a director in the last 3 years who doesn't think that he or she needs projections in their show.
Oy.
And I have been told that you are famously known for telling people, no, you don't need projections in your show. So I guess my question is, where is projections going?
Well, I would like to see a lot less of them, in truth. Where are they going? I don't know. And I'm reading a lot, doing a lot of research on various things, and I look at augmented reality and virtual reality and all of those things. And I don't think that it's going there. I hope it's not going there. I would like to see things scaled back quite a bit, because I would say projections are in their terrible twos, or adolescence. It's like still trying to figure out what it is, who it is, and what it wants to be. And it's just that everybody can do it. And so they are doing it. And it's like a new toy. And I have to say, boys, as you are all boys, you do love a toy. And it's that sometimes I just feel like, oh, let's get all the toys and all the right. I spoke to Peter Negrini when he was doing Evan Hansen. I guess we were on a panel or something, and I hadn't opened yet. And I said, Peter, how's Evan Hansen going? He said, oh, we've got $500,000 worth of computing power. I said, how's the show, honey? It's like, is there a story there I want to know? So this is where I'm sort of flummoxed at the moment. I have agreed to do a new musical, which is will be a very interesting exercise for me, because I kind of walked out of Broadway in 1999 with no intentions of coming back after the Civil Wars, and there has been a few things that have brought me back, and I'm coming back now. I've been living a very happy life in opera and ballet, which is an actual abstract art form. What I see of projection these days is not very abstract, and that frustrates me, because it's putting a hat on a hat in many cases. So I'm hoping it gets more abstract. I'm hoping I can get the level of abstraction I'm hoping for in this musical that I've been asked to do, forced to do. I can't see into the future, but I would like people to spend more time thinking about the story and less about what they can do to it.
Do you think it's the concert industry that's taken it to this level because they do have unlimited budgets?
I think part of it is that. I think it's like when movies got to do Cinerama and all these other crazy things because they were afraid of television. I think that theater is afraid of the internet and streaming movies. So they think that they're in competition with that. And what they don't understand is that once they become live movies, they're going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Because once we lose the humanity, why would I go there? I'm going to have an experience that can happen only one time this night, and with these people in this environment, and it will never be the same. I'm going there to commune with and disappear into this story that is being told by these human beings who are just like me, with no close-ups.
And I think in a lot of ways, too, it's almost like when, with the advent of microphones and fancy audio technology, actors no longer needed to learn how to project. They didn't have to learn how to fill the theater with their voice without help. I know you and I did a show once where the mics went out and one of the actresses just stopped singing because she didn't know what to do.
Right.
I think in some ways it's sort of become a crutch like that in the scenic world, in that visual storytelling world, that now we have all these things based on movies or books or, somebody's life story where we need to have 1,000 location changes, and it's just like it's easy to say we'll just have it all be projections instead of coming up with like a clever and engaging way to use human beings to tell that story.
Yeah, and it's flat.
Right.
That's the great horror of projection, is that it's flat. So to put a three-dimensional human being in a flat universe is ultimately demeaning to the human being, the actor on stage. It does not elevate them. It encompasses them. And that is not what theater is about. So I think that there's I'm hoping for subtlety. What was that play that Jeff Sugg did where there was like one projection? I'm down for that. Was it the Octoroon or some, and it was just like, yeah, a little restraint, gentlemen.
So, what kind of advice would you give to our younger listeners who may be just getting into the business or thinking about getting into the business?
Well, the best advice I can give you is to make sure that this is absolutely positively what you have to do. This is a difficult life working in the theater, and it comes with a lot of disappointments. So if it's all you can do, if it's all you ever, that your heart won't be happy if you're not doing it, then of course you have to do it. In terms of what I tell my students that I think is the best training, watch movies. And to watch silent movies, to watch all of the great cinematographers and understand visual storytelling. That's the most vital skill. To read poetry and to understand something about absence and how little of a thing you actually need to tell the entire story. Because that's when the audience is also working with you and it's a dance. If you give too much information, if things are too explicit, everybody sits back. I don't want people to sit back. I want them to lean in. I want them not to have to guess, but to wonder, what is that? How can I be a part of that? It's not to make things complicated or confusing, but to make it fragrant. So that, all right, is that a rose or a peony? Does it matter? It's scent. So those subtleties are the things that I think are important to embrace. So the question is, how do you understand that? Where do you learn that? You learn it by looking. And you just keep looking. Look at everything. Go everywhere. And know that you're looking. Looking is not seeing. Seeing comes after. You have to do an awful lot of looking before you can do valuable seeing. So start with looking and keep records, make note of things that are important to you, tear pictures out of magazines, keep a file of things that you think are interesting, beautiful, fascinating, whatever. They will come back. You will need them. You will want them. They will inspire you. That's the best advice that I can give anyone.
That was beautiful, Wendell. Thank you so much for joining us today on Light Talk. You are truly a legend, and we are honored to have you on the show. And we want to thank you for all the beautiful work you've done in the theater and all the work that we're going to see in the future. And we also like to thank you for being such an excellent teacher and producing some incredible projection designers, like our brother Zach here. And thank you for making the theater a much more beautiful place and also a much more equitable place for all our colleagues.
Well, I'm trying. God help them on Paradise Square now, but they don't know what they got into.
Apparently not. So the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again, you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, and just added Amazon Prime. That's right. You can now buy cheap tchotchkes and listen to us at the same time. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Flecked, Flocked, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from New York City, Washington, D.C., Long Beach, and from just left of the Chisholm Trail.
And be sure to join us next week where we welcome designers Roma Flowers and Xavier Pierce to Light Talk.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So thanks again to Wendell Harrington, and we will see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk. Bye, Wendell. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.